Hi, everyone. Welcome to the University of Notre Dame MBA Application Q&A. I'm Kristen McAndrew. I'm the Director of Admission for all the graduate business programs here at Notre Dame.
And I'm Bennett Bartel. I'm an Associate Director within the Graduate Business Programs Office at Notre Dame. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be doing the play-by-play for the different components of the MBA application. And Kristen's going to be handling some of the color commentary, giving you tips of advice when it comes to these different sections.
Bennett knows I'm the least athletic person on the planet, so he's gone with an athletic theme here. But he's exactly right. I am very confident that you can get through an online application. You did it probably as you were an undergraduate. And so the graduate application process is going to feel similar in some ways. But what I want to do to make this webinar useful for you is to offer insight from members of the admissions committee, give you advice, give you tips that hopefully will put your mind at peace in what I know can sometimes be a stressful process.
So because we can't see or hear you, please use the Q&A function within this webinar to interact with us. Please don't use the chat function. The Q&A function just allows us to better track your questions so none of them fall through the cracks. We will answer some of them live, especially if they coincide with the topics that we're covering, but we'll also save a few for the end, and then we will do our best to get through all of those questions before we get through the allotted time that we have for this webinar.
All right, great. So we're going to focus now on the presentation itself and share some information with you. So we'll start with where we're beginning. Basically, we're going to go through individual components, give you advice along the way. We'll make sure we'll cover deadlines. And then, like Bennett said, we'll take your questions using that Q&A function. So Bennett, I'll let you jump in.
So let's go ahead and get started here. When you create your application, this is going to be the first screen that you see. As you know, especially if you watched in the earlier webinar in the program, the Notre Dame MBA is offered in different formats, depending on your own personal experience and desired career path. You can choose to be considered for either the 1-year, the 2-year, or a dual degree MBA and Masters in Business Analytics. For more information on the nuts and bolts of these programs and these formats, you can go ahead and watch our colleague Joe Sweeney's webinar, which is in the archive section on our website.
Absolutely, and I'm going to jump in here with my first piece of advice for you. As Bennett indicated, you get to choose which program you'd like to be considered for between the 2-year, the 1-year, or the dual degree. But you also have an option to ask to be considered for both. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. If you tell the committee you're interested in being considered for more than one program, then we'll talk often with our career coaches, we'll talk as an admissions committee, and decide which one is the best fit for you and your goals. And you can be admitted to the program of your first choice, and if that one isn't the right fit for you, then you can be admitted to your second choice program as well. So you have this page and this opportunity to indicate that to us.
So down the left side of the screen, you'll see all the required portions of the application, and what we're going to do now is go through each of them. You can tell that they are hot linked, but we've put them in the order that we think makes the most sense and we think makes the application the easiest to complete. So overall, the Notre Dame MBA application requires 1 essay, a 4-slide PowerPoint presentation, your resume, at least 2 recommendations, your transcripts, and official score reports from either the GRE or the GMAT. And then if you are an international student who has not been educated in a school that was primarily taught in English, we also require a score from a test of English proficiency. Good example of this would be the TOEFL. So now what we're going to do is kind of go through each of these sections and hopefully provide some advice. When it comes to the essay, you'll actually have 3 choices. On the screen, you're going to see the abridged versions of the actual essay questions, but we encourage you to read all 3 and choose to answer the one that most resonates with you. Again, don't be alarmed. You don't need to answer all 3 of these questions. You only need to answer one of them. And I've got even more good news. The essay overall is relatively short. It should be no more than 2 pages, double spaced. And we ask that you remember to put your name on the top of each page. There's also a personal statement, and it is completely optional. It is also completely open-ended. Basically, it's your chance to share anything that you think might require further explanation, or tell the committee anything else that you feel we should know about your application. You know, Kristen, I know students are often confused about whether or not to submit this optional statement. So what do you recommend?
Absolutely. I know that everyone is trying to put their best foot forward here, and you want to feel like you've done everything possible when you're submitting this application. But please be assured there is no penalty if you don't submit an optional statement. We don't think less of candidates who don't do it. It doesn't impact you negatively at all. The only reason to write an optional statement is because you have something more to say to the admissions committee that you haven't had an opportunity to say anywhere else. I think of it this way. Imagine that you are able to stand behind me and look over my shoulder as I read your application. Is there something you want to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Kristen, I know you're looking at my transcript and you're seeing this year where I didn't do as well as I could have. Let me explain that. If you have that inclination with any part of your application, that's when you write an optional statement. If there are some circumstances perhaps that impacted your performance, or if there's just something you feel the admissions committee needs to know, that's when you write an optional statement. It can be very short, it can be a paragraph, it doesn't have to reveal any more than you're comfortable revealing, but that optional statement is your opportunity to say something that just didn't fit anywhere else. If there's no need to do that, if you fill out the application and you're able to let your essay and your PowerPoint and all the other parts speak for themselves, there's no reason to submit an optional statement. And I should explain, the essay is the way we get to know you better. The optional statement is your chance to say something more if you need to. But these are not your only 2 opportunities to have your voice heard as you go through the application process. There is one other way that we feel we really get to know candidates better as they go through the application. So I'll let Bennett tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I know this requirement might seem a bit unusual, but we also ask for a PowerPoint, a 4-slide PowerPoint presentation for 2 reasons. You know, number one, we're interested in your business and professional communication skills, but we also want to get to know who you are as a person. We leave the content intentionally open-ended, but the goal is to use those 4 slides to introduce yourself to the admissions committee. You can include photos, images, text. The only thing is don't use audio or video because it won't integrate with our application software. If you're not a fan of public speaking, I've got some more good news. You never actually have to present this PowerPoint to the committee. You simply have to upload it along with the other pieces that we just discussed. This next part is of the application is where you'll manage those submissions. And as you can see, when you upload your submissions, it's as easy as saving each piece electronically. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, in addition to the slides, you'll submit a resume. The format of that resume is up to you, but make sure that it's just 1 page and highlights the specific responsibilities that you've been managing in your career so far. I still feel like I didn't explain the PowerPoint well enough, and it might feel a bit vague to some of you. So Kristen, do you want to add your commentary on it and maybe tell these people why there are these 3 random pictures on the screen?
Absolutely. Now, I did not take the time to build a whole 4-slide PowerPoint presentation the way that we're going to ask you to. But I know this part of the process can feel a little intimidating. So I did pick a few pictures that I would probably include in my PowerPoint if I were to apply to the MBA program, just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that you might include and to make a couple of points for you. So what you can see on the screen is a picture of me with my nieces and nephews. Family is really important to me. I have a Notre Dame tradition as part of my family, and so I might use the PowerPoint as an opportunity to talk a little bit about my background, my family, and just who I am as a person. So I might include family in my PowerPoint, and you can absolutely include a picture like this one that was taken with a random cell phone. The PowerPoint slides are not a photography contest. They are not a graphic design competition. We don't care about the quality of your photos. It doesn't matter to us what colors you use. If you find the perfect Notre Dame blue to use as your background, I don't want you to spend time on that. I want you to think about how to become a three-dimensional person in the eyes of the admissions committee. So I mentioned to Bennett earlier in this webinar that I am not at all an athlete, and he knows that well. But I do really love music, and so I sing in a group here in South Bend, and that's an important part of my life. And so I might include some of that. You know, if I were to start an MBA program, I would want to be a full member of the community and maybe participate in the arts if there was an opportunity for that on campus. So I would talk about that in my PowerPoint presentation. And then you see the last photo there is a yoga mat. I am somebody who is a great devotee of yoga, partly because of the balance that it gives me. And so I might use that as a lead-in to talk about balance and the balance that I'm striving for in my professional life as well as my personal life as I enter an MBA program. So what I want you to understand with these photos and a little glimpse into who I am is that this PowerPoint is an opportunity for you to loosen the tie a little bit, to relax, and to show us another side of who you are and who you might be as a member of our community. We admit whole people to the MBA program, not just sponges who will come in and sit in class and soak up information and then go out and get a great job. We want students who will truly engage in the Notre Dame community. And so the PowerPoint is your chance to show us who you would be as a member of that community. And what I want to also tell you about the PowerPoint, but this applies to everything else, trust the process. Trust that we will read every word of your application. We will pore over your resume. We will read right to the last line of your essay. So you don't need to use this PowerPoint as a chance to rehash what you've already told us. This is a chance to say something new, to show us another side. And it's absolutely okay to be a little bit more lighthearted here. You don't have to be quite so buttoned up and serious and businesslike in this PowerPoint. This is your chance to let your personality come through. So as much as it might feel counterintuitive to say, I hope you have fun with this, I don't know if there's any part of applying to an MBA program that feels fun, but this is the part where the admissions committee really gets to know you. And I will be honest with you, after admissions committee, when we're making reference to a particular candidate, we will rarely say, the one who went to Notre Dame also as an undergrad and was an engineering major, we'll say that woman who did the hang gliding when she turned 30. Those are the things we remember, and that's where you become three-dimensional. So if you can, have a little bit of fun with us as you put that together. And we're looking for kind of how you present who you are. But there are other parts of the application where we seek out other people's impressions of you. So the PowerPoint is where you show us who you see, how you see yourself. Your recommendations are where other people share their impressions of you. So I'm going to spend it to talk a little bit about recommendations and how that part of the process works.
Absolutely. So you must submit at least 2 recommendations, but you can submit up to 3. Most importantly, though, they must be from people with insight into your professional potential. So translation, that means no friends or no family members. You can submit your application before your recommender has completed their part. Just be sure that you've provided all of their information and notified them that they'll be receiving an electronic request from the University of Notre Dame. Once you fill out the recommender form and click Send a Recommender, the form is then automatically sent to that person. My biggest piece of advice is to check with them first. If the recommender does not receive the form, encourage them to look in all of their spam folders. If they really can't find it, it's all right. We can definitely resend it. They can respond to our questions, but they can also upload a personal written letter to expand upon the questions that we've already posed to them. I encourage you to monitor your recommenders closely. I indicated that it is okay to submit your application before they've completed their part, but if they delay too long and we receive their comments too late, it may delay your admissions decision. Kristen, what other advice can you give them about these recommenders?
Sure. One question that I see we're already getting, and is a common one, is does it help me to get an alumnus or an alumna to write me a recommendation? And that's a tough one. Certainly, Notre Dame alumni know the program, they know our values, they know what kinds of students are successful here, and they care very much about this community. And so a reference from somebody who cares about the Notre Dame community and the strength of Notre Dame's network is a compelling voice, but only if that person truly knows you. So you're not at a distinct advantage if that person writes you a recommendation, and you're certainly not at an advantage if you just had coffee with them for the first time before they wrote your recommendation. If there's someone who truly knows who you are and what you can contribute and what you're capable of academically and professionally, and they're an alumnus or an alumna, sure. We're happy to welcome their perspective, but it certainly doesn't mean everything, and it doesn't matter if they don't truly know who you are. It is far more important to me that you get a recommender who can truly comment on your potential. And then I encourage you to prepare that person. If you give them your resume, or if you give them a list of accomplishments from work or in your personal life that you're proud of as a refresher, maybe it's somebody you worked with on a project a year ago or 2 months ago, and you want to kind of refresh them, that's fine. I, as someone who's written recommendations, absolutely appreciate that. So if you want to remind them of your accomplishments, that's great. The other thing you can do to prepare your recommender is to tell them a little more about what we care about at Notre Dame. This community is all about teamwork and collaboration. You know, if you're looking at Notre Dame, about our commitment to ethics. And so telling your recommender, these are things that Notre Dame is really interested in, is somebody with a high ethical standard, somebody who will lead from their values, and somebody who can function well as a member of a team. That will allow your recommenders to better focus their comments. I will also tell you, we've had a lot of questions about the common letter of recommendation. And Notre Dame has signed on and is participating in the Common LOR this year. So if you're crazy enough to want to apply to some other MBA programs out there, you can absolutely do that. And if they use the Common Letter of Recommendation, then I encourage you to tell your recommenders to save their comments. Take a screenshot, copy and paste into a Word document, because they'll be able to reuse those comments as they fill out the recommendations for other schools that also use the Common Letter. They have to still fill it out every time for each school, but at least they can save their comments and not have to think through the questions twice. So encourage your recommenders, save their responses. They may see those questions again if you apply to more than one school, although Bennett and I can't imagine why you would do that. All right, so let's get to the part that I know you all are dreading, and I can see based on the questions that are coming through already, this is the part you fear the most and seem to have the most anxiety about: standardized testing and interviews. So I'm going to ask Bennett to talk a little bit about that.
Oh yes, the dreaded standardized tests. Every candidate is required to take a standardized test, but as you can see, we do accept either the GMAT or the GRE. Both of those tests are viewed equally in the eyes of the admissions committee. And just for reference, our average GMAT score last year was a 682. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, international students are also required to take a test of English proficiency, but there is one exception. If you have had 6 consecutive semesters in the United States, or if the language of instruction at your undergrad institution was primarily taught in English, you can request a TOEFL waiver. Again, similar to the recommendations, if you are ready to submit your application, but haven't taken your required standardized tests, you can submit your application anyway. Just tell us that of your intended test dates, and we'll make sure that there is a place for you to put that information in the application. Now, Kristen, I know that this is probably the most stressful part for many people. So what advice do you have when it comes to getting the highest possible test score?
Sure. I wish I had a magic bullet for all of you here. I really do. There isn't one. The magic of taking the GMAT or the GRE is preparing, is putting the time in advance. And let me give you a little of the admissions committee's perspective on this. The GMAT and the GRE are not IQ tests. That score that you get does not tell us how intelligent you are. It's not designed to be a measure of intelligence. I look at the GMAT score or the GRE score that you submit to us as really your response to the first MBA challenge, or your first academic challenge, really, as you go through this MBA process. So when you have a tough academic challenge in front of you, are you going to put in the time to prepare and to be successful? That is what indicates your ability to be successful in a grad program. It's not the magical score that you get. It's that you were willing to, when a challenge was in front of you, just like it will be while you're an MBA student, will you put in the work, will you put in the preparation to do the very best that you can? So if you take the test and you're not satisfied with your score and you say, you know what, I can do better, I see that I have this area of weakness, I'm going to try to improve, then you can absolutely take the test again. I don't want you to take the test 16 times. If you put in more preparation, try again a second time, absolutely that's okay. It shows perseverance. It shows that you're willing to not take defeat lying down, but get back in there and try again. So absolutely, if you need to retake it, do that. But putting in the preparation is the absolute best thing you can do. Even the folks who make the GMAT tell us that scores go up directly corresponding to the amount of hours of prep time students put in. So do your homework is the best advice I have. And then once you retake it, if you feel like you've done the best you can, focus on the other parts of the application, move on. And we're going to do that right now.
All right, so the interview. Every year I conduct a bunch of admissions interviews, and my goal for every interview is always the same. I want to get to know you. That's it. I want to know why you're pursuing an MBA and why the Notre Dame and MBA is a great fit for you. The entire admissions committee views the interview as a conversation, not as an interrogation. Now, as you can see, not every student is interviewed. Once you've submitted your application, the committee will do an initial review and may invite you for an admissions interview. If that invitation comes, you've got two choices. You can either visit us on campus or you can interview online. We use Zoom for interviews, the same software that we're using right now. The format of the interview, whether it's online or in person, has no bearing on your admissions decision. So please do what's best, both logistically and financially for you. Kristen, what advice can you give them when it comes to the admissions interviews?
Yeah, number one, you might already assume you'll see all this advice online. Be professional. And the way I'll frame it for you is this. When I interview you, I am interviewing you for admission to the program, but I'm also imagining a year from now, 6 months from now, when you are in front of a recruiter representing the Notre Dame MBA, are you a candidate that we are going to be proud of, that's ready, that's going to present the program well? And so approach it professionally. Do your preparation. Have stories in mind that you want to tell. Now, here's a secret. We read the blogs too. We know there's tons of information out there about what to expect in a Notre Dame MBA interview. And that's okay. Doing your homework, doing your research is what I would expect from you as a Notre Dame MBA who's applying for a job. I want you to research the company once you get here as an MBA. And so before you come to this interview with me, I want you to prepare. So I expect you're probably going to have a pretty good sense of what our interview questions are before you ever walk through the door. So perfectly okay to think about stories you'd like to tell. Think about responses. Be prepared to articulate the reasons you want an MBA and where you're headed. But once you've done all that preparation, walk through the door and put it all behind you and engage with me. Look me in the eye and listen. I get a lot of students who are so over-prepared, so pre-scripted, they're waiting for that next question so they can identify it, think through their mental catalog of the answers they've already composed, and deliver me that perfect response. And that's not a conversation. I want somebody who can sit and interact with me in a really natural way. So absolutely prepare, think of stories, know what you want to get across in that interview. Also have questions prepared for me. Um, but once you walk through that door, leave it all behind you, listen to what I'm asking, and truly engage. Though that's the best kind of interview. And know this too, if you're nervous when you arrive, whether it's online or in person, I know those nerves can grab you. Um, think of it this way. I travel around the country. The admissions team is traveling around the world, interviewing candidates, meeting prospective students, looking for the very best students to become Notre Dame MBAs. So when we sit down with you one-on-one in that interview, we are looking for you and rooting for you to be outstanding. We don't want to trip you up or, like Bennett said, interrogate you. When you walk through the door, what's in my head is, I hope he or she is great. And so know that we are on the same side, and I'm rooting for you to be great in that interview as well. So that's the last part of the application process. What I'd like to do now is have Bennett just walk you through the timeline. We've got all these steps to complete. When do you do all these things?
Yep, so what you can see on the screen in front of you is our various application and decision deadlines. We want to be very clear what it means to meet one of these deadlines. You must submit all parts of your application by midnight on that day. If your recommenders take a couple of extra days to get their information submitted, that's okay. If your GMAT score takes a couple extra days to get to us, that's okay. You just need to submit the parts that are your responsibility. So that means the essay, the slides, your resume, unofficial transcripts, and your recommender's contact information. Chris, and I think that's a pretty good explanation, but what else do we need to cover about deadlines?
People often ask me, what are the benefits to applying early? And what I will say to you is, certainly it's true. The most seats, right now we haven't admitted anybody, so all seats in the MBA program are available and open. We haven't awarded any fellowships yet, so our full budget is at our disposal. So certainly those things are true. But for me, the true benefit of applying early for you is that it gives you time to plan for starting your MBA. This is a major life change. It takes some time to build your budget, research housing, and choose where you're going to live. You've got to relocate. You may have families, significant others. There might be more people involved in this decision. So, this is a huge, huge decision and a big process that impacts multiple parts of your life. And giving yourself time from the date you find out you're accepted to the date you walk in for orientation is really helpful to you in having a smooth start, feeling like you are ready for this. And so in order to make a smooth transition, I encourage you, apply early. My other piece of advice is, at some point you just have to let go. When you find yourself at that stage with this application where you're agonizing over the colors to use in your PowerPoint presentation, you're done. It's perfect. Hit submit. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to take that last step and say, I've done everything I can do here. But at some point, you've just got to go for it. And so if nothing significant is going to change, get it done.
Sorry, let's fast forward. Let's imagine that you've submitted all the parts of your application, you've done an admissions interview, you've nailed it, and congratulations, you get that letter in the mail that you've been accepted to the Notre Dame MBA. So now you're thinking about, all right, so how am I going to pay for this? For many students, part of the financing comes through our fellowships. Obviously, the Mendoza MBA is famous for the strength of our alumni network. And many times when people think alumni network, they think, all right, really good job leads. And I mean, that is absolutely true. But most people don't recognize that a supportive alumni network also means that our alumni give back to Notre Dame to help future MBA students. Most of our fellowships actually come directly from donor funds. On the application, you'll have an opportunity to tell us whether or not you'd like to be considered for a merit-based scholarship. We're specifically showing you this page of the application because we want you to remember this. Just say yes. If your answer to that question has no bearing on how we view the rest of your application or your admissions decision. If you are admitted, and you are awarded fellowship, you'll be notified in the exact same acceptance letter. Now, I know that fellowship is one of our most talked about topics, so I'm going to let Kristen kind of provide some additional insight.
Absolutely. I think Bennett gave you the best advice, which is say, yes, I want to be considered. Every year at the end of the cycle, I have a handful of students who say, oh, I didn't ask to be considered for a fellowship. Can I have one? And at that point, it may be too late for you to receive consideration. We will only put you in that consideration pool if you say yes. And as you can see on the screen here, fellowships are money that you don't have to pay back to us. All we ask at Notre Dame, because of our mission, because of what we believe, if you receive a fellowship, we ask that you be an active, engaged member of the community, that you give back to the greater South Bend community that we live in, that you give back to the Notre Dame family, maybe that you pay it forward as a student who responds to prospective students' questions online or in person when they visit. So you can give back in whatever way you choose. We're not going to count your hours or require you to do anything. We just ask that you personally take on an obligation to be invested in the Notre Dame community. And a lot of students ask, how can I stand out? How can I, maximize my opportunity to receive a fellowship? And I will tell you, it's not just something where we look at your GPA and your GMAT and say, okay, based on those, you get X amount of dollars. We're also interested in the quality of your work experience. We want to know what you're going to bring to the classroom from your own professional background. And we want to know you're fit for the Notre Dame MBA community. And you all know by now, you've spent enough time on our site and receiving our emails. We believe business can be a force for good in the world. And we are looking for students and awarding fellowships to students who are well aligned with that mission. We want students who will be active, engaged members of the MBA community. So when you ask for a fellowship, we ask you to make that commitment. And when we review your application for fellowship awards, we're taking that into account. What have you done in the past to make your community better? So hopefully that puts your mind at ease when it comes to fellowships and how the financial part of this works. Bennett actually has some good news for you when it comes to financing and the financial side of this whole process.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite parts of the webinar. Because you did come on and attend today's webinar and are obviously a very active member in the thought process of the Notre Dame MBA, we want to go ahead and waive your application fee. At the very end of the application, you'll be prompted to make a payment, or you can select to enter a fee waiver. So for attending today's webinar, just enter the word Irish Web. Now make sure that it is all capital letters and it is all one word. Once you click continue, it'll waive that $50 application fee. So again, thank you so much for listening to kind of the nuts and bolts of the MBA application. Over the last 30 minutes, we've actually amassed quite a few questions. So now in the remaining time that we have together, we're just going to try to go through and answer as many of them as possible.
All right, great. And I will add, the focus today is on the application itself and the process of applying. So we're going to focus on questions that are relevant to that topic, the actual application process itself. And I'm also going to say, because we're answering questions publicly, this is not the appropriate time for specific questions about the strength of your individual candidacy. Certainly our team stands ready to advise you when it comes to those individual questions. So you can reach out to us by email, use the contact us link on the website. We're happy to always work with you one-on-one. But there are a number of questions here that I think will benefit everybody if we can give you some answers. So I'm just going to go through these. The first one is, will the essay questions change from this year to next year? And I will answer a definitive maybe. This year we changed one of our 3 questions. We really liked the other 2, so we kept them the same, but we deleted one and added a new one. So it is possible that the essay questions will change next year, but our current questions for this application cycle are on our website right now, and they will remain for this entire cycle. Whether or not they'll change for the next cycle, I can't quite answer yet, but it's possible. We like to keep things fresh. I have another student who is asking about recommendations. Can they come from a faculty member in charge of an extracurricular activity when you were an undergrad who saw you in a leadership position? Absolutely. We want to have at least one professional recommendation, but yes, if someone saw you in a leadership role as an undergrad, that's a great person to write a recommendation for you. There's a lot of flexibility in who does that second one. And somebody who can comment, again, leadership is one of those things that we're especially interested in when we choose students for the program. So that would be a great fit. But I have another person who's worried about that professional recommendation because they work for a family business, and has been indicated, family and friends are not viable recommenders. So this is where you have to get a little creative. If you're part of a family business, we've had candidates use a client that family business served, who they'd interacted with on a long-term basis to write a recommendation. So it could be a client that you've worked with, it could be an outside vendor, someone related to your business could be a great person to write that recommendation. But if you're still struggling, again, reach out to us individually and let us know. I'm not seeing this question, but one that I know comes up fairly often also is, Kristen, I want to apply to the program, but I'm not quite ready to tell my employer that I'm considering leaving. So who can write my recommendation in that situation? And again, then it might be useful to work for a client, or to work with a client, or to work with a trusted colleague, or you may want to go to a prior employer who's seen you professionally. That's fine as well. What students will often do in that situation is include an optional statement where they'll say, you're not seeing a reference from my current employer, and here's why. They don't yet know I'm leaving. So that's perfectly okay. That's not an unusual experience. Now, I have somebody who's asking about the differences between the video interview and an interview with the admissions committee. And let me just clarify here. International students are asked to do a video pre-recorded interview where we have done the awkward part of getting ourselves on video and asking questions, and then we ask the candidates who are international to respond to those questions on a recorded video that we can watch later. That is not the traditional admissions interview. That's a language screening so that we can just check on the strength of your English language skills. If you're invited for an admissions interview, whether you do it online or in person, the format is exactly the same. The questions are the same, and that video interview will be live, not pre-recorded. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit about how those video interviews work. There is a language screening video interview that's pre-recorded. That's separate. If you're invited to an admissions interview, you will absolutely talk live with a member of the admissions committee, even if you do it on video. All right. We have a lot of questions here, and this is getting a little bit away from the application process, but because it's so popular, let me address the 1-year versus the 2-year program. I have one student who's asking if you can do any of them remotely, and no, our programs, the 1-year and the 2-year MBA are taught here on campus full-time. There are other programs offered through executive education that are weekend or part-time programs, and I encourage you to look into those if that's a good fit for you. But the 1-year and 2-year traditional MBAs at Notre Dame are taught full-time here on campus. And you can absolutely talk with a career coach if you're torn between the 1-year and the 2-year program. That's a tough decision. Let me tell you a little bit about, in general, the differences between the two. And again, for a longer answer, go back to the video interview about introducing the Notre Dame MBA that you see in the webinar archive on our website. Joe Sweeney does a great job of talking about the difference between the 1-year and the 2-year MBA, as well as the dual degree MBA, MSBA. But the 1-year is generally a program for students who have already studied financial accounting and statistics. Usually they've done that as undergrads, but other folks have done it part-time after graduating from their undergraduate institution, and that's fine too. We just need to see a transcript showing that you've completed those 2 classes, and the titles of those courses can be very different. Sometimes it's Intro to Financial Accounting. Every school will have a different title. If you're not sure if your class meets our requirements, just send us an email with a course description. You can copy and paste it right from the school's online catalog, and we'll take a look at it and tell you if it's approved. But in general, a one-year student has already taken financial accounting and statistics and has a little bit of an academic background in business. So they're not learning everything from scratch that a first-year MBA student would study. In addition to that, a one-year student is somebody who already has relevant work experience and knows very clearly what kind of role they want to go into after the MBA. So the one-year program is not for a student who is in a process of discernment, trying to figure out where to apply their skills and what industry or what kind of role might be right for them. A one-year student is somebody who has relevant work experience in their intended field and needs this credential in order to advance on the career path that they are already on. The reason for that is because a traditional 2-year MBA does the first year of the program, then they go off on a summer internship. And that internship is where they're building up their resumes and starting to show future employers that they have what it takes to function in that new industry, in that new role. And then they come back and complete the second year of the MBA. A one-year student comes over the summer and basically takes the first year of an MBA, all those introductory business courses, and crushes them into one very intense summer, taught at a faster pace because we know those courses are mostly review for you as a one-year student. Then in the fall, you jump into the second year of the 2-year MBA. You're completely blended together then in classes. Both 1-year and 2-year students are intermingled, taking the same classes, the same degree is earned at the end. It's just a matter of which format, which pace is right for you. Okay, so hopefully that clears up some of the 1-year versus 2-year. The other version of the MBA that you can consider with us is the dual degree, MBA, MSBA. And I have a student asking if that is a STEM degree. And yes, it does qualify as a STEM degree, which means that if you're an international student, you qualify for an extended OPT, more time in the US to get your career launched if that's your goal. Okay, so yes, the dual degree is considered a STEM program. Now, I have one student who's asking questions as a reapplicant, and they're looking for suggestions. What I will tell you is reapplicants are asked to write a slightly different essay. We ask you what's new, what's different since you last applied. And so you have an opportunity to tell us new things about what's happened in your career, if you've taken on new projects, gotten a promotion, if there's something that you're proud of. Absolutely, that's your opportunity to tell us about it. So reapplicants have a slightly different process, and if you want advice on your individual application, we're happy to give that. Now, I've got a student who's jumping ahead to the end and asking if we email admissions decisions. And I know the concern for international students is, I don't want to wait that long, and I absolutely understand that. So we actually do a number of things to notify you of your admissions decision. We do send a paper letter. This is a big moment, and we want you to have something to remember the day you got accepted to Notre Dame. But yes, we will release an email version of your decision as well. So we actually do both. The email comes first, the letter follows. So you will get both from us. Hopefully everyone here will eventually know what that experience is like. All right, so I have a couple students who are asking more about GMAT and GRE. For candidates who take both, someone's asking, does it look bad if I switch from one to the other? Not at all. If one test fits you better than the other, we absolutely understand that. The tests are designed to measure similar things, but what we often see is that a student who takes the GMAT tends to have a more technical or analytical, mathematical background. A GRE candidate often has a more liberal arts background. We welcome both at Notre Dame, so both tests are absolutely welcome. It's actually considered highly unethical for a school to allow either test but give one preference over the other. any part of your application process. If you make it available to candidates, then you should view it in an equal way. So absolutely take whichever test works for you. If you take both, that's fine too. But here's what I will tell you about GMAT and GRE. I just want to remind you, they don't define your intelligence for us. They are a measure of your ability to prepare for an academic challenge and then knock it out of the park. So if you retake the GMAT, you can send both scores. I encourage you always to ask to have your scores sent to Notre Dame. Even if you expect that you may not do that well, you're going to retake it. Only one set of scores goes to the admissions committee, and that's the scores from your very best day. We don't mix it up. We don't take your best analytical writing and your best IR score. We take the best day that you've had taking the GMAT or the GRE, and that's all that the admissions committee sees. Okay? I have students asking about official transcripts. Do you have to have them submitted both online and via mail? For the purposes of the application process, just an unofficial transcript uploaded online is absolutely fine. If you are admitted to the University of Notre Dame and you're going to be a student here, then we need to have a file that includes an official transcript. But that can come much later in the process. There's no need to worry about that quite yet. I have more questions about from international candidates. Somebody who graduated with a bachelor's degree from a U.S. university and who's asking what mode of interview they can expect. Basically, if you're able to come to campus, we're happy to welcome you here. Not because it gives you a preference in the application process, but because we are proud of this campus. We're consistently ranked as one of the most beautiful campuses in the United States, and we want you to have the opportunity to visit and see it. But if you're not able to come to campus, whether because of distance or job or family obligations, we certainly understand, and that's why we offer the Zoom option to do it online. But if you can't come to campus, it's not a problem. I just want to encourage everybody to come because this place is beautiful. All right. The other opportunity you have to come to campus is when you come here, we'll arrange for you not only to have an interview, but if you choose, you can have lunch with a current MBA student. They'll show you Mendoza, they'll show you around and give you a feel for the community. They'll introduce you to their friends, to their faculty. So it's a great way to get a sense of the community if you're able to come. But again, gives you no advantage in the process. All right. So I think we've covered most of the questions that are things that are not specific to individual applications. Please be assured if you missed any part of this or you have friends, colleagues who couldn't attend, we keep an archive of all webinars on our website. So you can absolutely tune in there and rewatch any parts that you missed. If there are questions you have that didn't get answered, please reach out to us and let us know. We're happy to address those for you one-on-one. Those few of you who had questions that are more individual to your application, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer those one-on-one and talk about your individual situation. One thing I want you to know is that as you go through this process, we see our role as coaches for you. I'm going back to Bennett's sports analogy from the beginning. We are your coaches through this process. We are not simply evaluators as members of the admissions committee, people who sit around a table and stamp yes or no on your application. We really see our role as advisors, as coaches, and we want to help you put together the very best application you can. So please continue the conversation with us more individually by email, by phone, or come to visit us here at Notre Dame. We'd love to have you. Watch for our next webinar coming up. They are all different topics. We're talking with career coaches. We're talking with members of the admissions committee and faculty. So watch for more webinars coming up. But for today, I hope you have a great evening, afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. Thank you for joining us, and go Irish.
Thank you again. Good luck.